Concepts with Rachel Patterson and Pete Roque. Today we have a special guest, Tim Schneider from AG's Learning. Tim's going to talk a little bit about leadership and the importance of it. He teaches nationally, goes to different jurisdictions. He teaches executive coaching. He's written a couple books. Latest one is A Heart for Leadership. He sent me a copy of Lead Wealth a year back. I loved it. And also Beyond Engagement. He also has that book. With that, Mr. Tim Schneider, can you introduce yourself?
Thank you very much, Pete, and thank you, Rachel, for having me today. It's a quite an honor to be with both of you. My name is Tim Schneider. I am the CEO and founder of Aegis Learning. We're one of the largest private training providers in the Western United States. We travel nationally and internationally to delivering leadership development programs to organizations of all sizes and all types. We've been incredibly blessed to have a 15-year plus relationship in the code enforcement and the building inspection industry that started with EduCode, the national education program that's done here in Las Vegas, Nevada, 15 years ago. And we have loved every single one of our interactions within this industry. From that, we've developed some additional relationships with both municipalities and political subdivisions, providing training for them and their code enforcement teams and their building department teams. Um, as Pete mentioned, I've written 3 books about leadership. I have a PhD in organizational development, a MBA, and dual bachelor's degrees in psychology and finance. I make my home in Las Vegas, Nevada, with my beautiful wife and my 13-year-old stepdaughter, which is kind of an interesting adventure in applied leadership principles. And also my constant companion over the last 9 years, Sydney the Corgi, who is also the director of security at Aegis Learning. So that's me in a bit of a nutshell. And again, I am just thrilled to be with you guys today. I've gotten the luxury of knowing Pete for a few years, both. And for those of you out there, there is actually a real live Pete. He is not just an internet meme. He is not just a series of 4 or 5 LinkedIn posts a day. There is a real live Pete, and I have met him, and I have the pictures to prove it. So I am incredibly, incredibly thrilled to be with you guys. So thank you again.
Well,
So
thank
quick story how I actually ran into Tim. So, I've seen Tim on here on LinkedIn and saw some of his stuff, but I never really, I see a lot of stuff on LinkedIn. And one day I was teaching a code enforcement class at EduCode, and I was teaching, and during my class, I'm a very kind of serious sometimes. I tend to joke here and there, but next door was everybody just cracking up. I'm like, what is this thing? So, during the break, I went and snuck my head, and I think he's like juggling or something. I don't know what he's doing, but the whole group is like doing all sorts of like animal noises, and I'm like, what the heck is this? After my class, I went and peeked in and sat in the class for a little bit, and I was like, wow, this is awesome stuff. And I said, you know what, I need to get on board with this guy, because this guy really, when he delivers the message of leadership and teamwork, which is a big component of leadership, is he makes it engaging, he makes it fun, he makes it interesting. And I just thought, I'm like, wow. After that, I just became an instant fan. And, I see my EduCode here and there. And every time I can snap a picture with this guy, I'm like, hey, come here. We got a selfie. So, and
Thank you, Pete. I have to tell you that there's some actual science associated with that madness a little bit that you described. Adult humans, and it doesn't matter the subject that you're talking about, but adult humans do not learn well in a grim environment. Uh, you know, we started down this path in 1992, and certainly made our fair share of mistakes along the way. But one of the things we figured out really, really quick is people are going to learn much better when they are engaged in a facilitative kind of approach, when they are part of the thing, and they're also going to learn so much better if it doesn't sound grim and like you're pulling a wisdom tooth out of the back of their head. They people want to have fun and laugh, and along along with that becomes powerful learning. And we've never done the death by PowerPoint thing, and that's always, quite on purpose. And sometimes when we go into a place, people say, "Well, where's your PowerPoint?" And it's like, "Yeah, don't have it, don't own it, won't own it." Just simply because that's not the environment that people learn best in.
Sure. Sure. Well, I'm super excited to have you on today. Just kind of doing some research about you, learning about the whole package and not just looking at leadership as, one person, one attribute, but seeing you put it into a whole package. I'm just really excited to hear about that. So thanks for being on today.
Thank you, Rachel. I appreciate that, and I'm especially pleased to know that Pete has friends too. That too warms my heart a bit.
I can say Pete does indeed have a friend.
Yeah. So Tim, so what got you started with this whole leadership program? I mean, how'd you get started? Was it a kid and you were just? I mean, what was it?
Yeah, that's kind of funny. I was always, as you can guess, a little bit on the outgoing side. I never shied away from, standing up and talking in front of a group. But it wasn't until I was in corporate America until the mid 1990s, and I had done my job in corporate America so well that our organization was purchased, and it was right then and there that I decided that I would no longer allow any corporate entity to decide my fate. If I was going to eat, I was going to eat. Based on my own work and my own effort. If we weren't going to eat, I'm going to be able to look in the mirror and say that was because of a failure of mine, not by some, giant decision making that was done in New York or Minneapolis or something like that. And so we hung out the shingle in 1992. I began doing this full time in 1994, and the research associated with it, and the behavioral elements associated with leadership and leadership science shortly thereafter. And there's no such thing in the world, as both of you know, there's no such thing in the world as an overnight success. And indeed, that was the case. It took a few years and a book or so to kind of develop the kind of recognition and the momentum to be recognized as a subject matter expert. We had some articles that were published in Harvard Business Review and things like that along the way. But that really was kind of the start. I can remember our first classes at the community college. I remember our very first customer or two. And what's really been cool about the journey too is that it's all been by, kind of a referral network and by word of mouth.
So when I talk to a lot of code enforcement officers, and one of the common things is, sometimes they're afraid to make that transition or plunge. As you know, I was in the government sector for many years, and I transitioned over to the private sector, and people are like, "What about your pension?" Or "What about this?" and "What about that?" And I'm like, you know what? I get to do what I love today. I get to hang out with people like Rachel, Cecilia, Marcus Kellum, Greg Smith, Kelvin Bean, all these guys. I get to hang out with industry people that are making an impact in the industry. And I love to do that. And I get to do that full time. That's my job. And not only that, but I get to help jurisdictions on the way along, it's fulfilling. It's one of those things that I took that as an opportunity that I probably wouldn't, that was everybody's dream job. And I'm like, you know what? I'm taking it. I have 15 years to retirement. But for you, what is actually the thing that made you make that decision, like inside of you?
I had a overwhelming desire to make a difference in people's lives, to make a difference in organizations' lives, if you will, even though they're not organic living creatures, but to make a difference, to make things better, to allow that to equip and to allow that leader to be successful and to enhance the lives of the team members that work for them. And ultimately, and some people will roll their eyes and say that that's cheesy, but you know what? That is our little stone to make a ripple in creating a better world. If we equip leaders to be better engaging of their team, to provide better feedback, to really make the lives of their team members better, that has such a circular impact and such a powerful impact on the communities in which we live. And, whether they stay at the organization they're at or whether they, grow their leadership in other areas like you've done, Pete, it really does have a significant positive impact. And that's what trips my trigger. It is all about making that impact and in a small, kind of tiny little way every day, just making the world a little teeny bit better.
I think we
And
can all appreciate that.
yeah. And you have a comment from Cecilia Muela who says it's not cheesy at all. It's rather so necessary.
Well, Cecilia, I agree. And not a lot of people like to kind of follow that circle around, but the little things we do, saying good morning to our team members, expressing our gratitude and our appreciation and providing positive feedback, providing true empowerment in the workplace. You know what? That trickle down effect means that team member is going to go home. They're going to be much more engaged and connected in their family units. Even simple stuff like they're going to hold the door at 7-Eleven. They're going to say thank you to the clerk. All of those things have impact. And, I'm not going to ever represent that those are big ripples or a giant tidal wave, but that ripple, when done each and every day, sure has impact in the world in which we live.
Absolutely. Tim, you talk about impact and, in leadership that we have to make an impact because otherwise we're not leaders, right? So it sounds like really you're fostering a culture of that when you're going into a setting like this. What's the first thing that you're looking for when you're working with an organization or a group?
That Rachel, that is an outstanding question. One of the very first things that I look for, and that kind of helps us guide our course of action and our recommended course of action with organizations, private sector and public sector, is the degree of engagement and the amount of regularly applied excellent leadership skills at the most senior level of an organization. When the CEO or the county manager or whoever it is, whoever the highest level of the organization, when they're all in, when they are fully connected and, really all about developing that, you know what? I got to tell you, that is an incredibly positive sign, and that makes our work significantly easier. I've been so lucky, and we have one great customer right now that their CEO and founder is just all about this. He's all about the individual growth and leadership development. But then to contrast that, there are also some leaders, senior level leaders that, it's good for you. This training, Rachel, is good for you. But you know what? I'm the county manager. I don't have to do that. I'm the CEO of Four Leaf. I don't have to do that. And there's a lot that really aren't as all in. And that's a really big sign to us about the overall health and the overall culture of that organization.
Yeah, that's awesomely said. So, and I think Mr. Rios agrees with his comment with, especially in this new work environment, we have to be mindful of our staff and be people focused. That's so important.
You know what, Mr. Rios? You could not be more right. Leadership is about people. Management is about processes and inventory and checking boxes and tracking whatever, but leadership is all about people. If you want to learn how to track something or a flow or something like that, well, I tell you what, we are not your people. But if you want to get the most out of your folks and get the most out of yourself, we are your people, because it is a people centric operation. It's about the diversity of our people. It's about the age demographics of our people. It's about appealing to their motivations and what makes them tick. And it's about developing a real live connectivity, an individual connectivity between leader and team member.
So
And Rachel, I have to tell you something too. I appreciate more than you'll ever know your ability to multitask and read me the questions, because it is all I can do with my little brain to stay focused on looking at the screen and talking. So, Rachel, I mean, if Pete gives you nothing more than that role, I am thrilled to death, and you're doing awesome. Thank you.
Well, thank you for being here. I love hearing about this because leadership is so important, Mr. Schneider. It just really is. You were saying, it starts at a senior level, though. So what happens when you're in a setting where you have, a bunch of line level folks that want and need that leadership? They're, earning for it, but they don't necessarily have that support at the senior level. What would you say in the situation like that?
We end up, and it's one of the things that I've taken some pride at, and we've certainly been consistent at over the years, is we're not afraid to have some difficult dialogues with senior leaders and mid-level leaders in an organization to say, you know what, this training for your frontline supervisors is awesome, and they're going to have some benefits from it. You're going to see some value coming from it. But it really needs to be engaged at all levels of the organization. And so we take some pride in being a truth teller when it comes to those things. And we'll also tell an organization, very directly that, there are parts of their organization that are disconnected or dysfunctional or not supportive of good leadership at a frontline level. And Rachel, what you described there is a pretty common phenomenon. Let's bring in supervisor training. That'll fix our ills. Well, you know what? It has great value, but it's not going to fix everything if every level of leadership isn't engaged in it. So part of our job is to have those dialogues and say, you know what? We need some stuff for the directors. We need some stuff for the senior leaders. This isn't just about those frontline supervisors.
I think that's healthy, and I appreciate that. Just being one of those people in those that that position in life. So taking that hard conversation on, for those folks, they greatly appreciate that. So know that.
Well, and Rachel, if I may too, some organizations really have, and some of you may have been in these organizations, involved in these organizations, but they actually have counterproductive systems in place. And I don't mean IT systems, but processes and, policies and things like that. But they have counterproductive processes that for good leadership out there at the front line. We'll teach and coach that front line, but then there's a policy that says you don't have the authority to make that decision. You have to run that up and get, two levels above that approval on an annual review. And I got to tell you, that is not helpful to overall leadership development or health of an organization.
Right. Absolutely. Makes a lot of sense.
So, Tim, one of the things that I learned a long time ago, when you have an army, you have your generals have to be great leaders, and then sometimes you have your captains that have to be great leaders, and your sergeants that have to be great leaders, and then sometimes you have just a squad leader that and it doesn't necessarily have to not the top has to be a super excellent leader. Sometimes you just need leadership at a frontline level, and one of the things that I see is a lot of folks, there's a lot of leadership out there, and I'm a pretty good empath, so I can feel when people are motivated and willing, but sometimes people just get beat up, and they just kind of want to quit. So what do you say to those folks that know that their agencies could be better, but they just don't have that drive? I mean, they have the drive, they just don't have that drive for that fight of leadership.
Yeah, you know what? One of the most common toxic elements in any organization, not only is it a common toxic element, but it also becomes a common restorative factor, is the lack of meaningful, regular, positive feedback in a working environment.
Mhm.
And simply what I mean by that is, Rachel does a good job, and then nothing happens. She doesn't hear a word about it. And then that's further compounded in so many cases by if Rachel does something poor, my goodness, we are on top of that like that. And she hears about it instantly. That is a recipe to suck the life out of any individual, any team, and any leader. Now, with that kind of set as a framework, the most commonly ignored in a positive from a positive feedback perspective are line level and mid-level leaders. They just plain and simply don't hear, hey, Rachel, you're doing a good job. Hey, Rachel, thank you so much for doing that. They just don't hear that very much. And I tell you, that will lead to burnout it just so quickly. And and so many leaders, and painfully we've seen it, Pete, you described it real well. They develop this why bother kind of attitude.
Mhm.
They come, they want to do the right thing, they fight the good fight, but man, they have been beaten to a pulp, been told no, they get no positive feedback. And now 3-4 years into it, they are just, man, going through the motions. So part of our job, part of my job, is to re-energize that and to reignite that back, not only with them individually, but reignite it back within their organization and create a culture and a structure so it can be perpetuated. The other thing I'll tell you about leaders, and I know a lot of folks have lived this lifetime too, related to burnout. Leaders just aren't so good at taking care of themselves. That taking a day off when they're not feeling it. A lot of leaders think they have to drag themselves into work when they're, half dead. Taking the time that they should to restore, to take care of themselves. Quite bluntly, workaholics don't make very good leaders. They just plain and simply have that high burnout factor, high frustration factor, and they just don't do a good job of taking care of themselves. And for us as leaders to learn that there's other segments of our lives that we got to take care of is a pretty important dynamic too.
And Tim, one of the things, and I'm guilty of that myself. I know a couple people on the chat are guilty because they are
Yes,
workaholics.
yes, you are, Pete. Let me make that real clear to everybody on there. Yes, you are.
But what's funny? One of the arts that I've learned is the art of delegation. And partnering with people like Rachel. I'm like, hey, Rachel, can we do this? Or Cecilia, can we do this? And we do a lot of things together as a team, so it loosens our loads. And using effective tools like a social media scheduler. Where I'm not. People are like, why are you posting at 2 a.m? I'm like, that's a scheduler. I'm not. I'm just posting stuff. Creating the content is the hard part, but it gets scheduled out. And I use these type of things. But when it comes to people in the workplace, a lot of times they feel like they're giving it 100%, and they're just not getting any. They get to a point where, like, what's the point? What's the point? And I hear this. I listen to forums. I watch people. I listen to people, and that's a common thing that people are like, why do I care so much? And what do you say to somebody that just wants to stop caring, but they can't stop caring because they care too much?
Yeah, you actually identified two phenomenons there, Pete. The first thing that you talked about is that kind of capitalizing back on that workaholic thing. There's a phenomenon we've identified it and talked quite a bit about it called savior syndrome, where that leader or that person wrongfully believes that they have to take care of and do everything themselves. And they fail to delegate and empower others. They fail to form those strategic relationships and partnerships that you described, and that can be a significant factor in that burnout. Now, that why bother thing, why do I care, why do I bother kind of thing, is pretty prevalent. I hate to say it, but it's pretty prevalent in the public sector. Public sector creates some systems where promotions are much more based on longevity than they really are core skills or core potential sets, which is different in many times from the private sector. That can be incredibly discouraging to folks. One of the other difficult transitions that a lot of public sector folks deal with is, every election cycle, they end up with a new set of governance and a new set of priorities that may not have been in alignment with what they were doing before. That too can be very, very discouraging. What you need in those environments, Pete, is a leader. I mean, as blunt as I can say that, you need a leader that can have the connectivity with their team, that can have and provide the positive feedback that they need on the day-to-day, everyday little victories that are out there to help those team members restore their, kind of faith in what they're doing. You also need a leader that can connect the vision. And in code enforcement, if you do it, it's pretty easy. You know what? We're protecting our community. But a leader has to be able to articulate that. A leader has to be able to say that to team members on multiple times, not just walk in and say, you know what, another day, another dollar, another day in code enforcement paradise. That doesn't cut it. Leader needs to make that connection between the real high level purpose of what we're doing and that individual tasks that our code enforcement officers and our building officials and building inspectors and those people are doing. They have to draw that line to that higher level man, we're doing good for our community. We are adding value. We are helping people. We are really, really doing a great job for our community. Leader needs to be able to articulate that and say that on a regular basis.
And I think in code enforcement, it's so important that we do that. Just getting out of our trucks and communicating with people and introducing ourselves and just being that conduit for them to say, hey, I didn't know this, or how can I fix this, and give them options. Because sending a letter sometimes it's people don't read. One, people don't read. Two, people, like, they get that and they feel targeted or singled out. A lot of times it's like, hey, you know what, I received a concern regarding X, Y, and Z, and maybe you didn't know this, and just have a dialogue with people.
Mhm.
I'm a very big believer that in the whole education of of the private sector, public sector. You have groups that think that, oh my god, every person's gonna like want to attack you, and it's not the case. I mean, people really don't know these rules, and a lot of times it's being informed because most people are embarrassed. So you, as a code enforcement officer, need to take that leadership role and educate them and say, hey, this is how we can help you solve your issues.
Right.
You again, Pete. I don't know if you do this intentionally, but you again hit on two incredibly, incredibly powerful points there. First of all, communication is foundational to leadership. It is the first competency of leadership. It is the most predictive of success in leadership, and communication is also foundational in success in a team environment. It's foundational to all success in a relationship. Communication becomes absolutely key. And your role in code enforcement in the building industry, your ability to communicate is going to be absolutely paramount to your success. This is not one of those jobs where the strong silent type should really apply because it's not going to work that well for you. And
Mhm.
the other thing that you hit on too, Pete, and it's so timely. I was with a group earlier this week in a full day session about the transition from enforcement to almost consultancy that goes on in your industry. That this is no longer about cut your grass because we said.
Mhm.
It's about communicating with those stakeholders, in this case, a homeowner, communicating with them and talking to them about the whys, about what needs to happen. And it really is a pretty significant shift that's been occurring for the last 4 or 5 years. The code enforcement and building officials that get that and are really making that transition, man, I tell you what, they have a huge impact in your industry. And those are the folks, those are the organizations that are really run by leaders out there too. The ones that are a little bit stuck out there, still loving to flash their badge and stuff like that, they're having a little bit more struggle in that transitional piece.
Mhm. Yeah,
You
that's
know,
a,
I think a lot of the education needs to be early, just early, you know. And I'll give a quick plug. Rachel's working on a code enforcement for kids. She did a Fiona the Fox video where she talks about picking up snow. And, I recently started a TikTok with my 6-year-old on daily walks that we do. And, and I ask him questions, and we just happened to catch a stormwater illicit discharge the other day, and I was explaining to him that the fishes, eat that garbage and stuff. So he's like, "Oh, that's bad," and he tells the kid, "Hey, that guy, that's illegal," and it's pretty funny. But I think letting people know, because the guy doing that probably wasn't aware, but now my 6-year-old's aware of that. So when he sees it, he knows that that's not supposed to happen. When he gets older, he's gonna know not to do that. Dump water, it's illicit stuff into the storm drain. Now, and I'll give credit to ICC for revamping their technical trade program, where they're trying to bring that education back to the high schools and to the colleges, because there's a big gap. If you see, what's the common thing that people say? It's a bunch of old white guys, that with no succession planning. But if you look, there's a lot of leaders, right now that are ready and willing to step. I think we have the youngest new ICC board member that was just put on the board. I mean, I think he's in his 30s. I mean, that's
right.
pretty impressive. And you have folks like Rachel that are out there, Cecilia Muela that's out there, just doing these things and working with the organizations to make sure that we continue to promote the advancement of our industry.
You
And
know,
yeah.
a couple of things that you pointed out there, Pete. unlearning is harder than learning. You know, generating new skills and new thoughts is relatively easy for most people. What is incredibly challenging and incredibly hard is to put aside old habits and old skills that, just absolutely plain and simply don't serve us well or don't serve us as well as they could. And that becomes a challenge for a lot of folks. So you're right. Education early becomes a key, but I'm going to put an asterisk on this. The technical stuff is awesome. Love that. I love what ICC is doing. I love what the code enforcement industry is doing. But somewhere along the line, we've got to include some people based stuff in that too, because our stakeholders, our team members, it is still a people based business at the end of the day. And the last thing I wanted to share about a comment you made there too, one of the observations about being an old guy and being with Educode for over 15 years, you know what I've got to watch, and I'm thrilled about it. And I love telling people about this at every opportunity I can. 15 years ago, when I started doing classes at Educode, Pete, what you described was absolutely right on. Old white guys, some of them crusty old white guys that had been in the construction industry 20 years, been doing this for, whatever. But I got to tell you, the one thing that's been awesome to watch over these 15 years, the female diversity. There was the leadership classes we did last year at Educode, which drew about 80 folks per class, which was, standing room only, absolutely incredible. But it was about half female. And that is such an awesome evolution to watch. And people like Rachel and people like Cecilia, and they tend to be the face of that. But there's a big trend moving in. The populations are getting more diverse. The populations are getting younger. The populations are getting more female. And I got to tell you, that is going to serve you guys so incredibly well moving forward as an industry set. It was not sustainable as it was 15 years ago. But the evolution, purposefully or not, that you've made is really going to serve you guys very, very well. More challenging for our leaders, but it's going to serve you incredibly well.
Yeah, you bring up great points. Great points. I mean, with just the newly elected ICC board president, Miss Cindy Davis, I mean, you see right there a shift, and a lot of females are empowered to become leaders because they're seeing more female leaders out there. So that's absolutely powerful.
One of the things Rachel, I've watched from the sidelines a little bit because I'm not, that connected to the ICC, but the board shadowing program is absolutely awesome. That ability to connect and mentor in that environment with a board member. And I got to tell you, if you know about that program, that's a replicatable model that you could do at your workplace. You could create a shadowing mentoring program that could have a significant impact on some of your emerging leaders that you have in your organization. And here's the coolest part about that. The cost to your organization.
Zero, yeah.
It's nothing. A little bit of effort, a little bit of time. It really can have such a significant impact on the lives of emerging and growing leaders. And a lot of leaders think, yeah, that's a good thing. I'll do it when I have time. Stop. Prioritize people development ahead of getting your spreadsheet and report done. Do the right thing by your people. And there's a, you talk about low hanging fruit. There's an easy one. Develop a mentoring program for some of your emerging talent, and you'll have the same impact that ICC is having with their board shadowing program.
Right. Tim, I actually can speak from experience. A couple of us on this call, Cece and I, myself, I got to experience the Board Shadow program this year with the 2021 Board Shadows. I got to go and experience the empowerment, the unbelievable successes, and the genuine and true connections that you make with these folks. So I couldn't agree more, to be honest. And, thanks to Cece for me getting to experience this program. It's something that you just relish in if you see it the way that it was intended to be shown. You bring it back, like you said, into your own organizations. Even if it's smaller, smaller programs such as this, I would have to say, like I said, speaking from experience, it's powerful and it's quite amazing.
Yeah, and good for you. And I have to tell you, I haven't been around a lot of the ICC board members. There's three of them I've been around a little bit, and all of them are outstanding leaders. And I tell you what, to be able to draw from them a bit is absolutely, absolutely incredible. And
Mhm.
bravo to ICC for doing that. But I think the key learning there is not just to look at it and say, what a great program, how cool, but it's what a great program, how cool, how can I bring that back to my place?
Right.
How can I complete that cycle and now do that for somebody else? You
Exactly.
know, and there's where the real power of those things really, really exists.
Yeah,
You
and
know what,
being
Tim?
empowered to do that. Sorry, Pete, didn't mean to interrupt you, but yeah, being empowered to do that. Once you leave those sessions and leave that experience, myself, you're just empowered to want to do more and give back.
Yeah, and then that's an interesting piece, Rachel, of self-management and emotional intelligence that we have to have
Right.
is that yeah, we all have get these moments of kind of fired up and ready to go.
Right.
But then we have to self-manage and turn that into action, turn
Ex-
that into reality, and make sure that fire, even though initially it's probably going to drop off a little bit, doesn't fade away completely out there.
Right.
Then that becomes kind of an on us kind of proposition.
Absolutely.
You know what, Tim? One of the things that code enforcement officers can do, and I've done it successfully in a couple of jurisdictions, is create a volunteer program. And a lot of times, me as a supervisor, I delegate that to my officers to train these new guys, and that gives them a sense of having to take that leadership role with these new folks. And I get to kind of train them to be future supervisors or something like that because now they're responsible for somebody else, and the trainees get the experience of learning how to be a part of our industry and learning how to take direction and learning where to look, and I think having that robust program is just an awesome thing to have. So if anybody's interested, there's volunteer programs out there. Reach out to me and I will send you a template and or a program, digital program.
From a bigger kind of perspective there, Pete, anytime you have the ability to increase your influence and ability to interact with stakeholders, and that in your case, that's volunteers, and anytime you get the opportunity to test drive
Mhm.
somebody in a new leadership role, that's awesome. You're going to leave the office for, go to Pittsburgh for the, national conference or whatever you're going to do, and then let somebody else be the acting leader or something like that. Anytime you get those opportunities, take them, run with them, and rotate them. Make sure everybody has an opportunity to do that wants to. But even if you're just taking a day off or a couple of days off, make somebody the acting lead, make somebody the acting supervisor, make somebody the acting director, whatever it is, but test drive what you have. You can sit around a conference room till you're blue in the face and talk about leadership and supervision, but until you see somebody actually in there doing it, there is nothing like that. And so every chance you get, and those are great little opportunities. There's one other learning that comes from those too. Sometimes there's that population of people that, yeah, I want to be a supervisor, I want to be the manager, I want to run this place, and then they do it for a couple of days, and then it's suddenly like, no, no, never want to do that again. I don't like people. I just, you know what? I don't want. I No, I'm done with that. And even though you might not like that learning, it still is powerful learning because not everybody's going to make it in a leadership role.
And you bring an interesting point about that. While I was in the first city I was in, I was skyrocketing, excelling, and I thought I was going to be the next supervisor. And they put somebody that had no code experience, and it totally jaded me, And I was so mad. And then I left that jurisdiction and went and sought an opportunity elsewhere. But in retrospect, and looking at it now, I was not ready for that position at that time. I recognize that now because A, I didn't have the people skills. B, I didn't know how to mentor others. And three, I really, you just wanted to be the guy to be the guy. There was really no reason why I should have been the supervisor at that time. And now it's like, nowadays I look at who I am going to court next to be the next supervisor. I'm always looking for the next leader, and I think once you get to a certain point in your life, you just love molding new leaders. It just becomes like, I don't know if you're addicted to it, but I love finding diamonds in the rough and having them work and having them do things and having them reinvigorate themselves.
Dr. Abraham Maslow, who is the father of motivational science, in his pyramid of the pyramid that everybody's familiar with is 5 levels of hierarchy of motivational needs. Maslow actually developed 7 levels, and the top level, the level above self-actualization, is called transcendence. And Maslow described transcendence as the ability to bring other people along with you on your motivational journey, which described, in many cases, that mentoring, growth, and blossoming process. And there really is, if you're into the leadership thing, there is nothing more satisfying than spending time growing and developing other folks, and then watching them all on their own blossom in front of you. That is an incredibly, incredibly satisfying thing to watch. And, whether you get to watch it daily or whether you get to watch it periodically, the one thing you can't deny yourself is that opportunity to feel that. So, no matter where we are in our leadership careers, find an opportunity to mentor, find an opportunity to make a difference, in somebody's life, and then have the discipline to kind of step back and watch them just grow and bloom in front of your eyes. It is absolutely amazing to watch.
It excites me
I
that there's people like you and Pete in the world, Mr. Schneider.
I'm excited that Pete and I live far enough away that we don't have to see each other that incredibly often.
I love it. I
Couple
love it.
times a year at the most.
But just seeing people invest in other people's success, it's just refreshing, and it's a beautiful thing. So thank you for what you do.
Well, and Rachel, thank you for saying that. But you know what is really interesting about that? Whether you make a living from it, as we do, or you're a practitioner, operating in an environment, you're the code enforcement supervisor at the city of North Las Vegas, or, whatever it is, we all have those exact same opportunities to make those differences in people's lives. It's not about, being anything special or having a certain job title. We all have those opportunities to do that. But the ones that do it, man, they're the ones that are the real leaders out there. The ones that say, yeah, you know what, mentoring somebody else is going to take a couple hours out of my life, but you know what, that's well worth that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hey, Nathan, I just saw your comment there. I mentioned before I'm not very good at reading those, but yours was so straightforward. I saw it. You're absolutely right. You could not be farther from the truth. I played baseball for a paycheck for a few years early in my life, and I still play baseball today. And there are so many parts of the game of baseball that to me are at this stage in my life are just absolutely intuitive. I could do it with my eyes closed. I know exactly what it's about. But yet, when you then try to coach a little league team, like I did with my children, my grown boys, you realize that experts, people that are good at what they do, oftentimes do not make the best teachers and instructors. And, experts tend to take shortcuts. Experts tend to be very assumptive in their communication patterns. And we have to learn as leaders that I might not always be the best teacher of a particular concept because I am so close and so expert in it that I take shortcuts and miss things that people might know. So uh, sometimes the best leaders are able to back off and say, you know what, I am not going to be the one that teaches you this. I'm going to find somebody else in our organization that does, but I'm going to make sure that I facilitate that happening. And you're right, Nathan. Teaching is a lot harder than doing. Sometimes doing we can do just absolutely mechanically, while teaching we have to kind of step back, turn our brain, slow down our brain,
Mhm.
and learn how to articulate things at a very kind of simplistic, low kind of level out there.
Right.
and one of the thing I want to add what is, practicing this it has to be a daily thing, just like, working out. You can't work out once a week and just say, hey, I'm going to be fit the rest of my life. practicing being constantly there, mentoring people. It's a constant thing. It isn't just a once in a while thing. Let me just take it on. You constantly have to do it, just to build up that skill. And one of the things that you said, Tim, was, me, when I became a first time supervisor, I had assumptions that everybody knew what I knew. And why can't you just do this? Or why can't you just do that? And then I realized that not everybody has the capability or the capacity to do what I do. Like you said, like maybe Michael Jordan, he doesn't understand how somebody just can't operate at his level, but then he puts in that much effort and work into what he does, and it just becomes natural for them. And same thing with the mentoring; it just becomes a natural thing. You take a mentoring position, but what I tell people is you have to build a foundation, because if you don't build that foundation, it's like building a house. If you're building on top of an already badly built foundation, you're just setting yourself up for failure. So you have to kind of scale it back and say, hey, these are the basic principles, and let's start over. Let's do what we need to do.
Nice. If I were to, not that you asked, but if I were to share just a couple of foundational elements of good leadership, that, leadership really is comprised of, multiple things. There are, we've identified 10 core competencies. Within each of those competencies, there's at least 10 to 12 skills and tactics associated with that. So there's, hundreds of things that leaders have to master to pull off. But if I were to identify for everybody on here some foundational pieces that are going to keep you, your head above water and be recognized as a good leader, the things I would tell you to concentrate on are: communication is going to save a ton of ills. If you communicate effectively, clearly, listen well, manage your tone, you're going to do okay. The other one is build solid within boundary relationships with your team members. Your team craves, and that word is chosen purposefully, they crave a meaningful connectivity with you, and they have that deep social based need to have relational connectivity. So build that connectivity with them, not friends, but just a nice relational connectivity. And then the third thing is go out of your way. Matter of fact, get uncomfortable with providing positive feedback. When your mind starts saying, man, I said thank you to Rachel 74 times, when your mind starts processing, I have done that a lot, you're darn close to where you should be. You got to get uncomfortable at it, because if you're not uncomfortable at it, you're not meeting the needs of your team members, that self-esteem based need. And those three elements right there, those three kind of big rocks, if you can knock those down early in your career, if you can knock those down prior to your promotion, man, those are powerful, powerful things for you to take with you. And FYI, those three things serve you pretty darn well in life, and not just in the workplace too.
Yeah, it's so well said, sir. A lot of people need that positive reinforcement, but oftentimes you find leaders that say, well, I'm not here to provide you that positive reinforcement. I'm here to, provide you your work for the day or whatever it may be. But I don't think that there's a lot of leaders out there that truly understand the effect and how powerful positive reinforcement and positive constructive criticism truly can be.
Rachel, you are so right. And there's two phenomenons, out there. There's that real arcane, old school look that is, Rachel, I pay you to do a good job. You don't need to hear it from me. Mercifully, that's kind of going away a bit. The other one is a little bit more complicated, and that is that there are a lot of leaders, and this is kind of a system failure, I guess, if you will. A lot of leaders recognize it. So I see, okay, Rachel, you have done a good job. I see it. I cognizantly process that. I know it. I see it. And I know that I should go tell you about it. But then, whether it's deadline pressure, whether it's workload pressure, whether it's, plain and simply, I just don't choose to prioritize it, whatever it is, it never gets translated into an actual action or into an actual, hey, Rachel, you did a great job with. And it really is about kind of relearning the piece of, yeah, she did a great job. I need to stand up, prioritize, walk out of my office, go say, Rachel, you did a great job with that. Thank you so much. Leaders need to make sure they understand that is job one. Your email inbox is still going to be there. I promise. The deadline on your spreadsheet is still going to be there. I promise it is. Go do the right thing and provide that positive feedback. The organizations and work cultures that embrace the positive feedback piece uh, perform at a significantly higher level than any of their peers. The data and the research that we've done over the last couple of decades related to that is they will perform at a 90 percentile above organizations that do not engage in meaningful levels of personally provided positive feedback. So, this is more than just feeling good. This is really about moving the performance elements, the customer service levels, all those things in your working environment.
Absolutely.
And Tim, one of the things that was said earlier is, a lot of people don't learn any leadership at all at school. That's not taught. And, when you get to an organization, and I mean, you hear concepts of what a leader is, or, but how does one themselves recognize their own qualities when, when they know it's inside of them, but they really, don't accept that they're the leaders in the industry. And I'll give you an example. I've mentored a lot of people, and I tell them, hey, you're it. How do they learn to accept that role? Like, uh, everybody knows that they're the leader, but they don't want to accept it themselves.
Yeah, you know what? And there's two things there. You're right. Not a lot of not a lot of universities teach leadership. They do a good job of teaching management, not leadership. And then in industry specific, we do a good job of teaching, hardcore technical skills. We can teach you how to be an electrical inspector. We can teach you, elements of code, the laws of code. We can do all those things. Now, there's a couple of things about recognition. Not a lot of people self recognize their own, kind of leadership aptitudes and abilities. They often need that little push. They need that kind of begrudging promotion. They need that person in their life that says, "You can do this. I have faith in you." So I tell you what, perpetuating a cycle where those dialogues exist become very important, because not a lot of people are going to self-recognize that, and in fact that's very rare. What happens is people get some outside feedback. So Pete, you're telling them, hey, you'd make a great supervisor, you'd make a great manager, whatever it is. And then what happens is they hear that multiple times. Finally there is a reconciliation internally that goes, maybe I could pull this off. The other dynamic that comes into play in this is many of us me included, have worked for awful bosses. And a lot of people carry deep down inside of them some fear-based responses that they don't want to grow up to be that awful leader, and they don't want to be, vilified and hated as that awful kind of boss type. Now, what I will tell you and encourage everybody to kind of lock into is I think bad bosses are absolutely horrible, but they're also great lesson teachers. They are, if you can sit back, if you have the ability, if you have the emotional intelligence to step back and say, you know what, that guy was an absolute fill in the blank. I know this is a family show. I can't use my entire vocabulary. This person was a blank. And I am not going to replicate any of these kind of specific behaviors. When you're able to do that, you'll take a great lesson from that bad boss. When you worry and fret that you're going to turn into that bad boss, that can be very self-defeating for you. And really you can kind of struggle with that. I don't want to grow up to kind of be from that. It does become, at the end of the day, it becomes a choice of how you want to do it. And then one other kind of obstacle out there, Pete, is that we as leaders sometimes aren't the best at being good role models for what leadership is about. So we tell somebody, yeah, you know what, I really think you could do it. I really think you could be a code enforcement supervisor. But yet they see all the stress, all the time, all the, stuff that we go through. We don't do a very good job of protecting that. They look at it and go, heck, I don't want to be like you. You know what? You're losing your hair. You're cranky about half the time. I don't want to be like you. And so we as leaders, existing leaders, have to do a better job of modeling what really good leadership looks like if we want others to jump up and join us in that.
And we had Jose Roy join us live from Pittsburgh last week on our live program on the Tuesday show, and he explained, and he's actually on the call, and he did explain why he joins a lot of these committees to be an example for his people. It's important. I 100% agree, because if some of the pictures I posted of myself are like me in a hazmat suit or something, and I love telling my people, hey, if you're in the trenches, I'll be in the trenches with you if I need to be. If I don't have to be, I won't, but I'm willing and able to do it. And I think that's a lot of, you get a lot of supervisors that, do as I say, not as I do. And that's a common thing that a lot of people see out in the field, especially like if you feel that your supervisor doesn't know anything about code enforcement. A lot of times they're not put there because of their technical skills. They're put there because of their management skills, and people need to understand that.
Well, and Pete, sometimes we do a very poor job about, being overly transparent. We'll go to a meeting or something, we'll come back and go, oh yeah, they cut our budget again, and oh yeah, they don't understand code enforcement. We've got to learn that if we want folks to grow up to be us and above, we have to model the behaviors that would let somebody want to be us. Not, us walking around the workplace looking like and sounding like Eeyore isn't going to accomplish that. You know, yeah, or that, constantly coming down from the, senior level meetings and acting and looking beat up. That's just not going to cut it for us.
And one of the other questions that normally comes up, what do you do when you're that supervisor, and you maybe you recognize that you're not a good supervisor, for those guys, what do you say to those guys?
Uh, Leave, quit, self terminate. I don't, and there are those. I mean, there are those folks that, you know, eh, they make that recognition that they got the promotion for all the wrong reasons. They never embraced the skills. Now, the good news is leadership is a learned set of skills and behaviors. If you choose to learn them and make a change, you will be successful. There's no doubt about it. But if you want to, just kind of dig in and say, you know what, I've been doing this 25 years. I am not going to start caring about my people now. I'm not going to start communicating with my people now. I'm not going to start providing positive feedback now. If you're there, you are stuck. Now, the good news is ultimately that will catch up with you. You are not going to be successful in that kind of role for very long. But the good news, the optimistic piece, is that if you want, I mean, even if you recognize right now, hey, man, I am not doing a good job at this leadership thing. Well, you know what? It is learned. It is a set of progressive skills and competencies. And you'll be able to be okay if you embrace that and truly unlearn the bad stuff and learn the new stuff.
Well, really, and aren't you always learning with leadership? I mean, the world is forever changing, so leadership forever has to change, correct?
It is. I had a gentleman I was coaching uh, earlier this week, and he said, I'm feeling really good. I'm feeling like I'm kind of at the end stage of that. And I kind of shook my head at him and I smiled and said, there is no end stage.
Right.
Leadership is a constant process of learning. It's a
Right.
constant process of unlearning. It's a process of, constant set of kind of challenging yourself to do new and different things. And as a leader, you can't be that soul that is, grasping your IBM Selectric typewriter as they're trying to put a laptop in front of your face. You got to be able to be flexible and dynamic and roll with the flow. I mean, if 2019 and 2020 didn't teach us anything, it was that the best leaders are going to be highly flexible, highly dynamic, highly adaptive in their approach. And you know what? This isn't going to be the last major change that's seen in our lifetimes. We've gone through this before, and we'll go through it again. And the only way we get through that is by continuously learning and growing.
So, Tim, we're reaching out. I told you the hour would go by like really quick, so we're at an hour. So, what I want to tell everybody. So, Tim, I'm going to put Tim's information here. Tim, can you tell us how people can reach you if they have any questions or they'd like to talk to you or anything like that?
Absolutely. And that is perfectly done. Our website is www.discoveraegis.com. You can reach us via email at info@discoveraegis.com. And our office number is area code 702-685-2603. And if any of you have any specific questions or comments, I would be thrilled to help you with that or to answer any that you have. And or plain and simply, if you're a little bit frustrated and just want to talk a little bit, I'm generally amicable to that too. If Pete starts calling a little bit too often, I will probably change that office number. But for the rest of you, please feel free to reach out and call at any time.
It's been an absolute pleasure.
And we appreciate your time. Just a couple of quick notes. ACE is coming up next month. That's the annual Code Enforcement National Conference, which is in Glendale, Arizona. Tim will be at EduCode 2022. That's the last week of February, early days of March. So look out for that. It's brought on by the Southern Nevada Region ICC chapter. So look out for that. And again, thank you so much. This will be available on Spotify within maybe the next few days. So feel free to listen to it on your way home. It's a great topic. I knew we would run out of time, but I love having Tim here. He's like, he can go nonstop. This is just an hour. I mean, this guy gives you 8 hours of good content. That's because we're asking him a bunch of questions. And
Right.
Imagine if the audience was asking questions too. But thank you very much. And thank you for joining us. And we appreciate you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Tim.
Thank you, Tim.
Rachel.
It's a pleasure having you on today. If we could take all the information that you gave us and make a little pocket Tim card, I'd like to do that. So thank you very much for being on with us today.
Rachel, Pete, thank you all very much. It's been my pleasure. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right. Thanks.